On the first day after I died, my boyfriend brought his first love back home. They were kissing on the sofa that I bought as if no one else was around, eating the celery stuffed dumplings that I made by myself, and using the game console that I gave him. One day, his first love asked curiously, "Where's Sienna?" My boyfriend replied calmly, "We had a fight a few days ago. She applied for a business trip with the company." Oh, he still didn't know that I was already dead. On the day of Jasper's birthday, I got into a car accident on my way back and died on the spot. My soul was floating in the air, and I wanted to see Jasper one last time. Just then, I saw Jasper bringing his first love, Chloe, back to our home. Under the dim light, Chloe's fair face was flushed, looking as if she was quite drunk, hanging on Jasper like she had no bones. "Jespet, Jespet." Jasper held her waist firmly, brushed away her messy hair for her, and responded patiently one after another. Jasper, who had always been cold, would only show such tenderness when facing her. Seeing this scene, even though I was somewhat prepared, my heart still stung a little. Since learning the news that Chloe got divorced, Jasper had been absent-minded. He came home less and less often and became colder and colder towards me. I found out that Chloe's ex-husband's company went bankrupt and he absconded with the money. After getting divorced, Chloe found out that she was pregnant. The debt collectors came to block her every day, scaring her so much that she almost had a miscarriage several times. These days, Jasper had been staying in the hospital with her. The reason I had a fight with Jasper was that he wanted to bring Chloe home to take care of her. Chloe's parents once sponsored me. I can't not help her. The corners of my eyes turned red, just because of this? Jasper was silent for a moment, then suddenly crushed out his cigarette. "I said I'd marry you." "Sienna, what on earth are you worried about?" What was I worried about? Actually, Jasper knew it in his heart, but he pretended not to. That night, I suddenly lost control of my emotions and proposed breaking up with him for the first time. Jasper's face darkened even more. Without saying a word, he carried me into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and said, "Do you know what you were saying just now?" I trembled as I hugged myself. His tall figure loomed over me. He yanked off the buttons of his shirt and bit my lip almost punishingly. "Sienna, never mention breaking up to me." Cold water poured down on me, and the scalding hot breath rolled over my neck, blurring the face in front of me. "Chloe will only stay for a while. Once the police find her ex-husband, I'll send her back." He murmured against my earlobe, "It's really impossible between her and me." I gasped for breath while struggling, threatening with my eyes closed, "If you want me to agree, it'll only happen when I'm dead." Then, I really died. And Jasper really brought Chloe back. I watched as Jasper placed the drunk Chloe on the sofa and wiped her face with a hot towel. "You're pregnant. You shouldn't have drunk so much." His voice was deep, but his tone was gentle, much like how he used to scold her for not listening carefully in class back then. I don't know if Chloe heard him or not. She was mumbling, complaining about a headache. Jasper chuckled softly, helped her up, and placed his slender fingers on her forehead. He pressed gently from the forehead all the way to behind her ears and on her temples. It was such a warm scene that my heart tightened, as if it stopped for a few seconds and then came back to life with a flurry of beats. I was in a daze for a moment. Back when we just graduated from university, Jasper's grandmother passed away, and Chloe's parents, due to Jasper's family background, didn't agree to their being together and forced Chloe to go on blind dates and get married. During that gloomy half-year, it was I who accompanied Jasper through it bit by bit. Half a year later, he accepted my confession. Later, he decided to start a business and often went out for socializing and drinking. I also wiped his face like this, cooked him hangover soup, and took care of him all night long. The next day, I had dark circles under my eyes, looking exhausted. Jasper stared at me for a long time, sighed, and let me lie on his lap to give me a massage. I was a bit flattered and was soothed by his gentle yet firm massage. I even got a bit willful to Jasper, "You mustn't massage anyone else in the future, okay?" I regretted it right after I said it. Just as I was about to open my mouth to make up for it, I heard Jasper chuckle softly above my head, "Okay. However." Well, how could Chloe be considered as someone else? I just suddenly became an exception to Jasper, while she had always been his favorite from the very beginning. Suddenly, I felt that I should leave this place. I couldn't even bear to watch Jasper massage Chloe. What if they rekindled their old flame one day? What if they hugged? Kissed? Even. Just thinking about it, a sudden pain surged into my chest, and it felt like a row of ants were crawling up my back. I immediately became restless and rushed towards the door. But as soon as I touched the door, a sharp pain tore through me, even more painful than when I had the car accident and fell off the cliff and was smashed to pieces. Before I could scream, my body was yanked back. After several attempts, my face was as white as a sheet, and my whole body was drenched in cold sweat. I finally realized one thing: I couldn't leave this room. Or rather, I couldn't leave Jasper. Suddenly, I lost all my strength. I numbly continued to watch those two people. Jasper had finished massaging Chloe and was about to leave when one of her hands hooked around his neck. Chloe opened her eyes. The two of them looked into each other's eyes. "Jasper, do you still like me?" Chloe asked directly. Jasper stared into her eyes. "I hate you." Chloe's face turned pale, his palm covered her cheek, and his fingertips caressed it inch by inch, sighing as if, "But I've never forgotten you either." Chloe's eyes and brows lit up with a smile, as if she suddenly thought of something. Her eyes flickered. "What about Sienna? She's been with you for 5 years. What kind of feelings do you have for her?" Jasper was stunned. He moved his lips but didn't say anything. The atmosphere suddenly became quiet. Chloe's face changed slightly, and her scrutinizing and inquiring eyes fell on him. The next second, she slightly tilted her neck and kissed the corner of his mouth. Jasper's body visibly stiffened, but only for a moment. Then he took the initiative, grabbed her waist with his large hand and made her sit on his lap, clasped the back of her head with his fingers, and deepened the kiss. Instantly, a wave of nausea rushed to my head. I covered my lips, afraid that my churning stomach would reach my chest the next second. "Jasper, she's already left me. Don't leave me. I'm not alone." Chloe gasped softly, pleading against his lips. "I know you only have gratitude and guilt towards her. The person you really like is me." Chloe's kisses fell on his collarbone. She paused for a moment and then reached out to unbutton his shirt. Jasper suddenly grabbed her hand. "No." His voice was cold and deep, and his eyes were extremely cold too. Cold air emanated from him and gradually spread, making even my soul, which had no sense of temperature, shiver with cold. Chloe stared at him blankly, as if she hadn't expected to be rejected. "Is it because of Sienna that you—" I was also staring at him blankly, my uncontrollable heartbeat pounding chaotically. Jasper was silent for a while, then lowered his eyes, showing no emotion. "Chloe, I have a girlfriend now. This isn't good for you." Chloe understood. The corners of her mouth turned up slightly. "I'll wait for you." I understood too and laughed sarcastically. What Jasper meant was that before we broke up, he and Chloe wouldn't have any substantial deviant behavior. This had nothing to do with his character, nor was it out of much respect for me, his legitimate girlfriend. He just didn't want Chloe to bear any stains or moral condemnation that he cherished and loved her so much. Laughing and laughing, big tears rolled down my cheeks. After coaxing Chloe to sleep, Jasper was smoking alone on the balcony. He stood tall and straight, almost blending into the night, with only the bright red glow at the tip of his fingers. There was almost no expression on his face. His fingertips rubbed the cigarette repeatedly, which meant he was very irritable at the moment. I was forced to float within less than 2 meters of him, looking at him coldly. He had already made his feelings clear to the woman he loved. I didn't know what he was still irritable about. Oh, we hadn't broken up yet. Probably because of what had just happened, he was feeling unsatisfied. I thought. Suddenly, his phone beeped. Jasper almost immediately opened his phone, his extremely dark eyes fixed tightly on the screen. The next second, a flash of disappointment passed through his eyes. I immediately became curious and floated behind him to blatantly peek at his screen. I was stunned when I saw it. Jasper had opened the WeChat chat interface with me. Since that big fight, we hadn't contacted each other again. The last chat record was a message I sent him: Jasper's birthday is coming up in 7 days. What gift do you want? He might have been too busy with work that day, or perhaps he was taking care of Chloe in the hospital. He didn't reply. Now, Jasper's fingers were unconsciously sliding up and down, refreshing WeChat, as if doing so would make a message come from the other side. I didn't really know how to react. In a daze, Jasper had already sent a WeChat message. Jasper, it's 11:30. I understood his reminder in an instant. It was 11:30 at night. His birthday was almost over. The girlfriend who had never missed his birthday in the past 5 years, who always cooked him longevity noodles and made celery dumplings for him, hadn't even said "Happy Birthday" to him this year. However, I won't be able to say it anymore. Never again, not in the future, not ever. Because I'm already dead. Jasper stood on the balcony for a full half an hour. When he returned to the living room, shrouded in a chill, his face looked really awful. He stared at the phone screen for another 2 seconds and then threw it onto the sofa irritably. With his long legs, he walked to the fridge and took out a bag of celery dumplings that I had made last time but hadn't finished eating and had deliberately frozen. He thawed the dumplings expressionlessly, cooked them, and then sat at the dining table, eating them carefully one bite at a time with his head down. The grayish-white smoke rose to his brow bone, making him look even colder and more distant. Watching him eat the dumplings quietly, a thought suddenly popped into my head. Jasper probably cared about me a little. I was surprised, and then it dawned on me. Actually, strictly speaking, today isn't really Jasper's birthday. Jasper's actual birthday was a week ago. But 5 years ago on that day, Jasper's grandmother passed away and Chloe also left him. Since then, Jasper didn't want to celebrate his birthday anymore. It was my suggestion to change his birthday to a week later. And it was always me, being overly enthusiastic, who arranged to celebrate his birthday for him. I'm an orphan. When I was in the welfare home, my birthday was the happiest time of the year for me. I just wanted to make him a little happier too. The first time I celebrated his birthday for him, I spent several months learning the game he liked to play behind his back. I had planned to stay up all night to help him clear the game levels with him, but by 2 o'clock, I fell asleep with my head on his lap. When I woke up and opened my eyes, Jasper above me was holding his arms, his cold eyes slightly curved, looking at me with a faint smile. Staying up all night? The second time, I cooked a big table of dishes. I cut several of my fingers while cutting vegetables. In the end, only the longevity noodles and celery dumplings were edible. Jasper ate them all, though. And usually taciturn, he even complimented the dumplings several times. I've always been the type to take advantage of a good situation. I straightened my chest. You have a heart condition. Eating celery stuffed ones can lower your blood pressure and heart rate. So whether it's the shape or the taste of the cooking, I studied really hard. Jasper looked at me for a long time back then. Sienna, why are you so nice to me? I smiled. Because I like you. I really like you. Before I could continue my confession, Jasper held my jaw and leaned down to kiss me. Jasper was always used to hiding his emotions. That was the first time I felt such intense and exposed emotions from him. Then we rolled onto the bed. That night, we were both so inexperienced, exploring each other. But later, it was as if he had learned by instinct. He held my waist, and his dark and deep pupils reflected my tear-stained face. It was silent and intense until the wee hours of the morning. But it turned out that being persistent was quite useful. When I celebrated his birthday for the 3rd and 4th times, Jasper just acquiesced. Thinking about it, the 5 years of sincere treatment and constant companionship did leave some marks in his heart. With a ding-dong sound, my wandering thoughts were pulled back. Jasper seemed to be in a daze too. He didn't even notice that the spoon had fallen on the ground. I subconsciously bent down to pick it up, but my intangible hand just passed right through the spoon. I was stunned for a moment. Then the spoon was picked up by another hand. What are you eating? Chloe's soft voice rang out in the room. I opened my palm, looked at these hands that were getting blurrier and could hardly take shape anymore, and then looked at Chloe's long, slender and fair hands. Suddenly, I felt a bit inferior. Obviously, before I died, my hands were also very beautiful. Now I can cook a whole table of good dishes and clear video games effortlessly, but now I can't even touch anything. What flavor are these dumplings? They smell so strange. Chloe took another spoon and slowly stirred the dumplings in Jasper's bowl. Jasper frowned slightly but still answered, celery. Chloe nodded casually and looked up at Jasper. Why did Sienna say today is your birthday? Jasper was slightly taken aback. Chloe smiled frankly, your phone was on the sofa just now. I took a look at your chat records. Then she added, I didn't expect your lock screen password has never changed. 0802, the day we first met. Jasper had his head down. I couldn't tell what emotions were in his eyes. My heart still ached a little. Once I had pouted and asked Jasper to change his lock screen password to the day we got together, but he had always refused. So it was because of her. Answer my question quickly. Why did Sienna say today is your birthday? I stared coldly at Chloe. Jasper had promised me before that this was a secret only between him and me. He wouldn't tell anyone. Many bad things happened 5 years ago on that day. She said to postpone my birthday for a week and tried various ways to celebrate it for me. That familiar voice was as low and cold as always. I bit my tongue hard, and a fishy sweet taste quietly surged up, spreading everywhere recklessly. Suddenly, I felt like laughing at myself. Chloe was silent for a moment. She was really nice to you. Did she make these dumplings too? Specially for your birthday? Yes. You coaxed me to go to sleep first just to eat these? To keep your promise to her? Jasper didn't answer. The atmosphere fell into silence. Chloe quickly scooped up a dumpling and suddenly said, I want to eat it. No. I let out a hoarse scream. No one could hear me. I reached out to grab her spoon. I couldn't touch it. Jasper's eyes darkened slightly. He grabbed her wrist and warned in a low voice, Chloe. Chloe stared into his eyes and repeated word by word, I want to eat it. Jasper, I'll accompany you on every birthday of yours in the future. She was forcing him to make a choice. Jasper's jawline tightened. A struggle flashed in his pitch-black pupils. After an unknown amount of time, he slowly released Chloe's hand. Chloe got to eat the dumpling as she wished. I stared blankly, tears continuously spilling from the corners of my eyes. It was like being cut open by knives again and again, with the heart torn apart, bloody and dripping. It wasn't just about the dumplings. These past few days, I floated in the corner of the room, watching them indifferently, feeling as if I had lost all emotions. But I don't know if it was my illusion. After what happened that day, Jasper seemed a lot colder towards Chloe. Except for playing games together, he didn't have any other intimate actions with Chloe. He even deliberately avoided Chloe's touch. One day, Chloe suddenly asked, I've always forgotten to ask. Where's Sienna? Jasper paused for a moment and replied calmly, we had a fight a few days ago. She applied for a business trip with the company. Chloe laughed. Not contacting for so many days. Maybe she's already wanted to break up with you for a long time. Jasper's eyes were gloomy. He was quite certain, impossible. As he said that, he subconsciously took out his phone, looking at the chat interface between him and me, with a rare trace of uneasiness and restlessness appearing between his brows. Oh, he still didn't know that I was already dead. Suddenly, I began to wonder about his reaction when he found out. The next day, Jasper received the ring I had sent him. The engagement ring he gave me. A month ago, Jasper and I went to a restaurant to eat. Halfway through the meal, the man sitting opposite me suddenly stood up, took out a ring without any warning, and got down on one knee. He was wearing a neat suit, looking noble and handsome, as if he had dressed up carefully, but his knuckles were slightly white from nervousness. The people around were all cheering. He had a smile on his lips and looked at me with burning eyes. Sienna, marry me. I cried until my eyes were red and tremblingly extended my hand, allowing him to put the ring on my ring finger. My name is Sienna, but I've never had a stable life. I really hope to have a real family. Now, Jasper has proposed to me. I thought that I would finally have a family. However, Chloe came back. She wasn't doing well, and the first person she thought of wasn't her parents but Jasper. And my boyfriend, my fiancé, dutifully helped her and even wanted to bring her home to take care of her. After that unpleasant parting, I applied for a business trip with the company and went to Hangzhou. After thinking for a week, I sent the engagement ring back by express. I want to break up with him. That was the ring Jasper received today. The moment he saw the ring, his face darkened as if water could drip from it, and his eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of ice that wouldn't melt. He kept sending me messages and calling me, asking me what I meant. He smoked cigarette after cigarette, and his facial features became colder and harder. The restlessness between his brows was almost overflowing. Messages indicating that the call couldn't be connected kept coming from the other side. Until he didn't know how many cigarettes he had smoked and the cigarette pack was empty, he finally lowered his eyelids and said in a very soft voice, "Sienna, do you really want to leave me?" "Yes. I've already left, completely and thoroughly. You can finally be with Chloe as you wish." I replied softly, even though he couldn't hear me. Suddenly, I remembered something. I'm also a decisive person. Since I had already returned the ring to him at that time, I had already decided to break up. So why did I still rush back to celebrate his birthday? I tried hard to recall, always feeling as if I had forgotten something important. I noticed that Jasper was getting distracted more often. At night, when he was working in the study, Chloe thoughtfully brought him coffee. Jasper didn't look up and blurted out, "Sienna, it's too late now. You go and rest first." Chloe stared at him blankly. Jasper was also stunned. He said, "Sorry," in a low voice and then raised his hand to rub his forehead as if trying to hide something. After that, he seemed to be lost in thought. He kept staring at that page of the plan without turning it or noticing Chloe, who had an ugly look on her face beside him. The next day, Chloe went to clean Jasper's bedroom. Whether it was on purpose or not, she quietly packed up my things and accidentally knocked down the Lego set that he and I had put together. When Jasper saw it, he rarely showed his displeasure to her. "Don't touch these." Then he shook off her hand and focused on putting the scattered building blocks back together one by one. He spent as long putting them together as Chloe silently watched beside him. During his interactions with Chloe, Jasper often got distracted. He would get distracted when he saw the sunflowers I planted on the balcony, when he saw the clothes I bought for him in the wardrobe, and when he saw the little goldfish I raised in the fish tank. Even when chatting with Chloe, when he heard the character and that she unconsciously said, he would suddenly freeze. I floated in the air, calmly watching Chloe's face turn paler and paler. Not only Chloe, but I also realized it. Jasper seemed to be slowly realizing his true feelings. I narrowed my eyes, staring at the man I had loved all my life on the sofa. He seemed a little drunk. His brows were furrowed together, and a flush rose on his handsome face. He was on the phone with his friend, Zaire. "Do you want Sienna or Chloe?" Zaire asked. He was silent for a moment. "Sienna has already broken up with me. So it's Chloe?" He subconsciously frowned. It seemed that the other side guessed something. "Jasper, a person's heart is small. Love can only be given to one person. Go and find Sienna." Jasper didn't say anything. He lowered his head and gently rubbed the engagement ring with his fingers. After a long while, "Okay." I watched him silently. If it were in the past, seeing this scene might have made me happy. But now, I'm dead. I'm dead. Restlessness was like ants crawling into my heart, going deeper and deeper, making me more and more restless. Unnamed emotions were churning in my head, and I could hardly breathe. Zaire asked him to send Chloe to her parents' place, and he agreed. At the same time, he also bought a plane ticket to the place where I was on a business trip. That day, he seemed to plan to talk to Chloe about this matter. As soon as he got home, Chloe came out with a bowl of soup. Chloe had always been otherworldly, but today she cooked a sumptuous dinner herself and even specially made fresh celery dumplings. It was my fault that day. I forced you to make a choice. I was just so scared of losing you. I didn't want to get married back then either, but my mother threatened me with suicide. During the 5 years I was married to someone else, I thought of you every day. She was wearing my apron and looking at Jasper pitifully. Tears streamed down her face one after another. The corners of her eyes were red, as if smeared with rouge. I know you have her in your heart now, but I can wait for you. Don't drive me away. She wrapped her arms around his waist, buried her face in his chest, carefully grasped his clothes, and her voice was so broken that it was heartbreaking. At least stay with me for a while. When she comes back, I'll leave. Okay? Jasper didn't say anything. But he didn't push her away either. He sighed gently and gently wiped away her tears. Don't cry anymore. It's not good for the baby. He was still soft-hearted. A dull pain spread from my heart, and a strong sense of bitterness surged through my body. How much do you have to love someone to be disappointed in them again and again? In these 5 years, I exhausted all my enthusiasm and treated him wholeheartedly, and only then did I manage to carve out a place in his heart. But she just cried a little, and he compromised. After learning that Chloe would stay for a while longer, Zaire had a complicated expression. Aren't you afraid that Sienna will really leave you when she finds out? Chloe and I are just friends now. Jasper stood extremely straight, and his face never showed a single change. When Sienna comes back after she calms down, Chloe will have already left. She won't know. Zaire sighed and said no more. I watched all this expressionlessly, looking forward more and more to seeing how Jasper would react when he found out that I was already dead. These past few days, Jasper accompanied Chloe as agreed. They didn't have any inappropriate behavior, and their way of getting along really was like that of ordinary friends. And I had been trying hard to recall what I had forgotten and why I had rushed back to celebrate his birthday. Somehow, I had a premonition that when I remembered this thing, my soul would no longer be bound to Jasper, and I would achieve true liberation. But every time I tried to recall, my head would ache as if it were about to explode. Just when I was feeling disheartened, Jasper accompanied Chloe to go shopping in the mall. Coincidentally, they saw some baby products, and Chloe pulled him inside. Chloe picked up a princess dress and covered her lips with a smile. I really hope the baby in my belly is a daughter. Then I can buy all kinds of beautiful dresses for her. Jasper, do you like sons or daughters? Chloe asked curiously. Daughters, I guess. Jasper's lips curled up slightly, and his eyes fell on those baby products. Under the sunlight, his pitch-black pupils sparkled a little, looking somewhat gentle. Sienna likes. Then he added, I'll like whatever she gives birth to. I stood there blankly. The floodgates of memory suddenly opened. My head ached unbearably, and countless images rushed in like wild horses that had broken free. After an unknown amount of time, I lay motionless on the ground. I cried and then laughed, laughed and then cried. I trembled as I placed my hand on my lower abdomen. I remembered. The reason why I rushed back to celebrate Jasper's birthday and wanted to give each other another chance was because I was pregnant. After getting the diagnosis report, I thought about it all night and finally decided to have a good talk with Jasper. On the day before his birthday, I rushed there overnight. I planned to give him this news as a birthday present face to face. In the car, I stroked my belly while imagining what expression Jasper would have when he learned this news. Would he laugh out loud? Probably not. He had always been that expressionless face. At most, he would slightly curl his lips and look at me seriously. Sienna, actually, I'm quite happy that you're pregnant. Would he be as excited as I was about this baby? Probably. On the night of the proposal, he gasped slightly in my ear, his breath warm. Sienna, after we get married, let's have a baby. I've always known that you want a lot of family members. Yes, I want a lot of family members. How could Jasper understand me so well? Thinking about it, I actually laughed. The driver saw this from the rearview mirror and asked me what I was laughing at. I didn't answer. I just told him to focus on driving. After all, it was raining heavily outside. He should pay attention to safety. The journey was a bit boring. I restrained my impulse to send a message to Jasper directly and started browsing Weibo. Then I noticed that someone had followed me. It was Chloe. I opened Chloe's Weibo. I found that all she posted were pictures of Jasper. From the pictures on her Weibo, I saw how Jasper had been taking meticulous care of her in the hospital these days and how their old feelings had been reigniting step by step. It was like a newlywed couple who had just had a baby. Getting an injection hurts, but with you by my side, I'm not afraid anymore. The accompanying picture showed Jasper's calm side face and two hands clasped together. After going around in circles, it's still you who treats me the best. The accompanying picture showed Jasper, who had always been a bit of a germaphobe, bowing his head to peel shrimp for her. Last night, you fell asleep by the bed. I secretly kissed you. I knew you weren't asleep. This Weibo post didn't have a photo attached. However, Jasper had liked it. I stared fixedly at the screen, my heart tightening suddenly, and I could only feel the blood rushing to my head. How many dirty things does one have to see in a lifetime? I didn't want to see any more. And then, God really didn't let me see any more. At the edge of the cliff, a red heavy-duty truck suddenly lost control and crashed straight into us. Our car rolled down the cliff with us in it, and then there was an explosion. I rushed there full of anticipation and joy. But I died with despair and hatred. The intense shock made me temporarily lose this part of my memory, but the searing hatred made my soul leave my body and stay with Jasper. It turned out that it wasn't because I loved him that I couldn't leave him. It was because I hated him. What was Jasper doing when I died along with the baby in my womb? He was taking care of someone else and someone else's baby. Perhaps sensing something, Jasper, who was talking to Chloe, suddenly frowned tightly and subconsciously looked around, but found nothing. At that moment, his phone beeped. Zaire's trembling voice came from the other end of the phone. Jasper, I have something to tell you. Please don't get excited. I have a good friend who is a traffic policeman. There was a serious traffic accident on his side. All the passengers and the driver died. The identity of a pregnant woman was only found out today. That pregnant woman is Sienna. I had imagined many times how Jasper would react when he learned of my death. Now, I finally saw it. This man who had been chatting and laughing with his first love just a moment ago was slightly stunned for a moment when he heard this news. His brows furrowed tightly. Don't make such jokes. It's true. Jasper was stunned for a few seconds and then snapped, Zaire, don't make such jokes. A week ago, the taxi she was in collided with a truck, fell off the cliff and then exploded. Since there were only a few pieces of body remains at the scene and the police didn't receive a missing person report from the pregnant woman's family, for a whole week. Zaire choked up on the other end, as if he couldn't continue. After a whole week, the police finally confirmed Sienna's identity through DNA comparison. Jasper's face gradually changed. He seemed to have turned into a wooden or clay statue, completely rigid. Jasper, did you know that she was pregnant? She was out of contact for a week. Didn't you go looking for her? With Zaire's repeated questions, Jasper's face had lost all color. His lips were trembling violently. Impossible, impossible. You're lying to me. Jasper? Chloe looked at him worriedly and gently held his hand. Zaire paused on the other end of the phone. His tone was hard to tell whether it was sarcastic or mocking. Are you with Chloe now? The air was silent for several seconds. Well, during the week when Sienna was out of contact, you were with her all the time. Jasper was stunned for a moment and then almost immediately reacted. He forcefully shook off Chloe's hand, his eyes red, his expression flustered, like a child who had done something wrong. Her body is now stored in the funeral parlor. The police have notified her family to claim it. You should go there later. Zaire was silent for a long time. She has no family. Only you. Jasper stood there blankly. His tall figure hunched over a little, and then he slowly crouched down, curling up motionless, repeating one sentence over and over again. Impossible, impossible. It seemed that was the only thing he could say. He didn't want to believe that I was dead. I watched this scene coldly and with a sense of satisfaction. After regaining my memory, I clearly felt the hatred for him, which almost engulfed me. But after the brief satisfaction of revenge, endless exhaustion and sadness welled up in my heart. Both love and hate are so exhausting. I lived such a tiring life, and even my death was so tiring. After regaining my memory, I didn't disappear immediately. Except that my soul became a bit more transparent. I was still restricted to be around Jasper, only the range of his activities that I could be around had become a bit larger. I followed Jasper to the funeral parlor. This man, who had always been good at hiding his emotions, was now standing rigidly by the door, not even daring to approach. The staff inside sighed. It was already quite difficult to find so many charred remains. The body was pieced together. Alas, I heard it was a pregnant woman. Indeed. The wrist and finger joints were severely bent and deformed. She must have been trying desperately to protect the baby in her womb at that time. Jasper's face was as pale as a sheet. His body swayed slightly. If he hadn't been leaning on the wall, it seemed that he would have fallen down in the next second. The staff saw Jasper. "Are you the family member? Come here." Jasper walked slowly and unsteadily towards them. Those two people left, and he was the only one left in the room. His tall shadow blocked the light above his head. His back was straight as a ramrod. His clenched fist was so tight that his fingernails dug into his flesh without him realizing it. He looked at my body covered with a white cloth and began to talk to himself. "On the way here just now, I suddenly remembered something that I had never told you before." His cold tone was slightly trembling, but the fluctuation was not big, just like usual. "Back then, we were both very young. One day, I went downstairs to buy something. A little boy was being naughty and took the change from a blind grandma's bowl on the roadside. You suddenly rushed over and fought with him. You were so thin, but you held his hand tightly and fiercely. Finally, the kid couldn't take it anymore and took the initiative to give you $1 in my hand. Before that, I heard them say that you were an orphan and liked to steal things. But at that time, your hair was messy, your lips were bruised, you gasped for a while on the ground, then stood up and put the money into the blind grandma's bowl, and then left calmly. This scene, the blind grandma couldn't see it, and the little boy wouldn't tell anyone, but I saw it. After this incident, I couldn't help but start paying attention to you. My eyes always couldn't help but fall on you. Later, when someone in the class framed you for stealing the class fee, my first reaction was to stand up and speak for you. I think I'll never forget the light in your eyes at that moment in my life. Later, your eyes also gradually fell on me. You would blush when you looked at me, and you would stare at me in a daze. Those years, it was you who stood beside me at the school's Excellent Student Award ceremony. It was you who handed me water when I was playing basketball. It was you who smiled and presented flowers to congratulate me when I won the sprint race. And it was you who accompanied me to win the math Olympiad competition. Then, Chloe appeared. He paused for a moment and then raised his hand to cover his face. It seemed that something was flowing out from between his fingers. "Sienna, it was I who noticed you first, and you also fell in love with me." "Why did I fall in love with someone else?" I watched him silently. I thought I would be completely unmoved, but there was still a faint pain spreading in my heart. "Yes." "Why?" "It was I who knew him first." "Why did we end up like this?" I wasn't a lively and outgoing person originally. But in front of Jasper, I always tried to be like a little son, trying my best to be nice to him. I had never been this gentle to anyone else, and I would never be this gentle to anyone else again. "Sienna, when I proposed to you, I really wanted to be with you for the rest of my life. Sienna, talk to me. Talk to me, okay? Sienna. Sienna. Wife." He called again and again. No one responded to him. He became anxious, even frantic. His lips turned white. He called my name again and again until his voice was hoarse and he could no longer call out. "You clearly said that you would never leave me." His voice was confused and hoarse, as if squeezed out from the depths of his throat. His shoulders kept trembling. His eyes were bloodshot, like a desperate wild beast with no way out, looking extremely terrifying and pitiful at the same time. I watched this grief-stricken man quietly. Perhaps, it was only at this moment that he truly realized that I was dead. After getting my urn, Jasper locked himself in his room. I felt my soul getting weaker and weaker. I curled up on the ground wearily to sleep. In a daze, I heard Chloe knocking on the door continuously, her voice full of urgent crying. Jasper, it's been 3 days. Please eat something, okay? Even if she's gone, you can't treat your body like this. If she knew, she would surely be heartbroken. I woke up from my drowsiness, rubbed my eyes, and subconsciously looked at the closed door. So, it had been 3 days already? An hour later, Zaire arrived. He kicked the door open roughly. Immediately, a strong smell of cigarette smoke and alcohol spread out from inside. The glaring light poured into the room, enveloping the man on the ground. Around him were scattered a pile of cigarette butts, toppled over bottles of liquor, and my urn. He was quietly assembling Lego blocks with his head down. The Lego set that he and I hadn't finished assembling before. It had only been a few days, but Jasper looked as if he had lost a lot of weight. There was a layer of bluish-black stubble on his chin, and his eye sockets were deeply sunken. Jasper. Chloe's voice was hoarse. Hearing the noise, he slowly looked up, like a piece of machinery that had been out of repair for a long time. His bloodshot eyes were empty and cold. Why haven't you left yet? He seemed to be in a daze and said softly, Sienna will be unhappy if she sees you when she comes back. Chloe's face turned pale. While in a daze, he suddenly raised his head. A hint of panic overflowed from between his brows. The tone in which he spoke to Chloe was cold and heartless. This is the home of Sienna and me. You have no right to stay here. Chloe stared at him blankly, as if she couldn't believe he would say such things to her. Big tears rolled down her cheeks. Jasper frowned tightly, looking a bit impatient. Get out. Seeing that he remained unmoved, a look of embarrassment flashed in Chloe's eyes, and she ran away crying. Jasper continued assembling the Lego blocks expressionlessly, seemingly not caring at all. If you could have done this earlier. Zaire suddenly spoke. Jasper's face turned as white as a sheet. His fingers trembled, and the Lego blocks fell to the ground along with it. He stared blankly at that block. Pain and sorrow surged in his pupils. That day, I had a huge fight with her. I told her that I was going to bring Chloe home to take care of her. If it weren't for that, she wouldn't have applied for a business trip, and she wouldn't have. On the day of the accident, she took a shortcut. She was hurrying back. Hurrying to celebrate my birthday. She wanted to give me the news of her pregnancy as a birthday present. And what was I doing at that time? Jasper raised his hand to cover the area of his heart and closed his eyes in pain. I brought Chloe home while she was away. He took a deep breath and started assembling the Lego blocks again, but his fingers were trembling. One block would fall as he tried to assemble it. Zaire, I regret it. I really regret it. Zaire stood straight, looking at him silently. His voice was very soft. They say that those who betray true feelings will get their comeuppance sooner or later. However, at the cost of her death, isn't she a bit too pitiful? Jasper's eyes were red and he was in a daze, unable to say a word. Zaire let out a long sigh. She won't be happy to see you like this. Jasper, no matter what, you have to continue with your life. A few days later, Jasper insisted on holding a funeral for me. It was drizzling. Everything was gray. The whole city seemed to be shrouded in gloom. Jasper didn't hold an umbrella. He stood silently in front of the tombstone, looking at my black and white photo on it. What was engraved on the tombstone was, deceased wife, Sienna. One by one, people placed white chrysanthemums under my tombstone. After the funeral, Jasper kept standing still. The rain trickled down his hair, leaving streaks of water on his pale cheeks. Zaire brought an umbrella and handed it to him. Do you know that you have a heart condition? Any cold can trigger an infection. Do you have to be so hard on your body? Jasper expressionlessly threw the umbrella away. Then let me die of the illness. Sure enough, after that day, Jasper fell seriously ill. Originally, it was just a minor cold, but he refused to take medicine, which triggered an infection. He stayed in the hospital for a full half a month. At night, the ward was quiet. Jasper stared blankly at the silent darkness outside the window and said in a very soft and confused voice, "Sienna, why haven't you come to my dream even once? You once said you would take good care of my heart. Now I've made it sick. Come back and see me, okay?" After being discharged from the hospital, just as he recovered from the illness, Jasper got infected again due to excessive drinking and was sent to the intensive care unit. Zaire stared coldly at him with lifeless eyes and slapped him hard. "Since you want to die, I might as well slap you to death. Anyway, when you were doing those disgusting things back then, I already wanted to slap you for Sienna. She's already dead. Who are you putting on this act for now? Are you just trying to move yourself? I'm telling you, if it weren't for your grandmother being so nice to me and asking me to look after you, I wouldn't bother with you. If Sienna saw your self-righteous behavior, she would only feel disgusted. Do you understand?" Jasper's face was as white as a sheet. He stared at him blankly. I don't know if Jasper took Zaire's words to heart, but after that day, he was no longer decadent and didn't abuse his body anymore. He calmly went to work and continued with his life calmly. However, I always felt that there was something strange about him. At night, he would stand on the balcony and smoke for a while. The smoke slowly filled the air, blurring his face, but it only added to his loneliness and couldn't dispel the chill around him. After smoking, he would go to the fridge and take out that bag of dumplings. There weren't many dumplings left, probably about a dozen. Jasper would cook a few of them to eat every day. Before going to sleep, he would quietly look at my urn for a while and say softly, "Good night." I found that I didn't have to follow Jasper all the time anymore. Moreover, I always felt dizzy and inexplicably sleepy, so I just stayed in the room to sleep every day. These days, he seemed to be very busy at work and always came back late. I didn't know what he was busy with until Zaire called him. "What do you mean by transferring all your company shares to me?" He replied calmly, "I just want to take a break for a while. I heard that you donated a large sum of money to the orphanage? Is it because of her?" Jasper gave a faint yes and said, "You can consider it as my way of atoning for my sins." Zaire was silent for a moment and then changed the topic. Chloe's ex-husband somehow came back to find her. They had an argument. Chloe was pushed by him and had a miscarriage. Her ex-husband went to the police station to turn himself in. Chloe is still in a coma in the hospital. I heard that her condition is very bad and she may not be able to have children in the future. Jasper remained expressionless throughout, as if this incident couldn't stir up any emotions in him. "I'm going to sleep. I'll hang up now." A few more days passed. Jasper came back from work and, as usual, went to the balcony to smoke for a while. When he came back and saw that there were only a few dumplings left in the fridge, he was stunned for a moment and then suddenly smiled. A smile that was of relief, relaxation, and could even be described as pleasant. I frowned slightly. He didn't eat the dumplings right away. Instead, he went to the shopping mall alone. He went to the mother and baby section, asked the salesperson carefully and patiently, bought some baby products, and then went downstairs to buy a lot of roses from the aunt there. When paying, the aunt was beaming with joy. "Your girlfriend liked to buy flowers from me the most. By the way, I haven't seen her for a long time. Where did she go?" Jasper just stood there quietly for a moment. "She went on a business trip." The aunt nodded. "The flowers at night aren't that fresh. Come over tomorrow during the day, and I'll give you." "No, thank you, aunt." He refused gently but firmly, word by word. "Tonight, I'm going on a business trip too." The aunt was stunned for a moment, then covered her lips and teased, "I understand. You miss your girlfriend, right?" "Yes." There was a faint smile on Jasper's lips. His long eyelashes drooped down. "I miss her very much. Really, really miss her." Back home, Jasper sat at the dining table and ate the last few dumplings quietly and carefully, and drank up the soup cleanly too. Then he took a bath, changed into a clean and tidy set of clothes, placed the roses and baby products on the bed, and looked at them with his eyes down for a while. After doing all this, He took out a fruit knife that he didn't know when he had put there and a bottle of sleeping pills that he didn't know when he had bought from the drawer. He opened the bottle of sleeping pills, poured them all out, and then picked them up one by one and put them into his mouth. I was shaking all over, staring at him fixedly. An indescribable rage swelled up in my chest with irresistible force, grinding over my bones and skin inch by inch, gradually sweeping through my whole body. He actually wanted to commit suicide. When he picked up the fruit knife, held it against his wrist, and calmly made a light cut, I screamed out, "Why?" With a clang, the fruit knife fell to the ground. Sienna. Blood beads kept gushing out from the wound on his wrist. The smell of blood spread, but Jasper seemed unaware of it. He stared blankly and foolishly at me. Sure enough, when people are about to die, they will see the people they want to see. Sienna, I miss you so much. I tried my best to control my emotions, and my tone was extremely cold. But I don't want to see you at all. Jasper's face turned pale. He stood up with some difficulty, picked up the bouquet of roses and the baby clothes on the bed, and forced a smile on his lips that could be considered ingratiating. These are the gifts I bought for you and the baby. He rubbed the 2 pieces of clothes uneasily with his fingers and half lowered his head uncomfortably. I don't know if it's a daughter or a son, so I bought both kinds. I looked at him coldly. We don't need them. His body stiffened slightly, but he still kept his eyes down. I know you're still angry with me. I shouldn't have quarreled with you that day. Chloe was just my unwillingness from my youth. I've always loved you. Really, always, always you. Zaire said that those who betray true feelings have to pay the price, so I'm here to accompany you. Sienna, I was wrong. Please forgive me, okay? With each word he said, it was as if a needle tip was piercing my heart. The already taut nerves all over my body snapped completely at this moment. I took a deep breath and suddenly laughed. Do you know what was the last thing I saw when I had the car accident that day? Jasper looked up blankly. I stared into his eyes, word by word. I saw Chloe's Weibo. Jasper's face turned as white as a sheet. I saw how you took meticulous care of her in the hospital, how you held her hand when she was afraid of getting an injection, how you carefully peeled shrimp for her, how she secretly kissed you to test you, and how you liked her Weibo post. I died with hatred for you. So, Jasper, how dare you ask me to forgive you? Jasper swayed, and his whole face lost its color. He moved his lips but couldn't say a word. There was profound pain and regret in his eyes. Is this painful already? It's not enough. I forced a very faint smile and looked up at him. Jasper, were the dumplings you ate with Chloe on your birthday delicious? Jasper was slightly stunned. How did you know? His pupils suddenly dilated, as if he had realized something. Fear spread widely in his eyes. I met his gaze, and my smile grew even brighter. Because my soul has never left these days. Jasper, this isn't an illusion that appears when you're about to die. But I've been watching you two all along. Jasper froze completely, as if being swept over by a strong, indescribable, and profound despair. His lips were trembling violently, and his eyes were so red that they almost seemed to drip blood. I watched you two kissing on the sofa that I bought as if no one else was around, watched you eating the celery dumplings that I made, watched you telling her our secrets, watched you using the game console that I gave you, and watched you choosing her over me again and again. Jasper, the baby and I died in pain and despair, while you knew nothing. You were holding Chloe, planning how to break up with me, and openly being with her. I tore open all of this, word by word, bloodily. It felt as if something was screeching in my heart. My eyes were so sore and swollen that my vision was blurred. So, Jasper, just because you've now realized your true feelings, you're going to hypocritically commit suicide to accompany me to prove your so-called deep affection? Why? Jasper was already huddled on the ground, hugging his head. His eyes were empty, and there were actually bloody tears flowing from his eyes. The warm blood flowed down his nose and jaw, dripping onto the 2 pieces of baby clothes, gradually staining them red, so red and passionate and desperate. Jasper seemed to suddenly come to his senses. He stared blankly at the 2 pieces of clothes. His voice was dry and stiff. The clothes are dirty. The clothes are dirty. He panicked and wanted to wipe them. The blood on his wrist also dripped onto the clothes. He froze, trembling helplessly, and looked up at me in despair and sadness. Sienna, the clothes for the baby are dirty. What should I do? I looked at him. It felt as if my heart was being tightly grasped by a big hand. It hurt so much that I could hardly breathe. I closed my eyes. Jasper, you don't deserve to commit suicide. You don't deserve to accompany us. You must live, and live in endless pain forever. The room was extremely quiet. Jasper was so quiet that I couldn't even hear his breathing. After an unknown amount of time, he whispered with a sob, "Okay." Hearing his "okay," it was as if some invisible shackles had been removed. My soul suddenly felt lighter. At the end of my consciousness, I seemed to see Jasper dialing 120. He finally looked at me deeply. "I've transferred all my company shares to Zaire. I'll donate the rest of the money to the orphanage too. Sienna, I'll have nothing left. I'll live a long life, using my whole life to atone for my sins." I finally closed my eyes, ready to go to a new world. I hope, in the next life, I can have parents who love me, a husband who loves me and respects me, and several beautiful and lovely children. But, please don't let me meet Jasper again.